Welcome to the One Gang Worldwide podcast, your ultimate ride into the world of motorcycles. Visit cyclesworldwide.com where we offer a completely free marketplace for everything motorcycles. Join our One Gang community where you can connect, share info, and swap stories with riders from all over the world. Join for free at cyclesworldwide.com and be a part of the One Gang community right now. On today's episode of the One Gang Worldwide podcast, we're talking with James Fish Alcorn from Alleyway Kustoms. Fish is a renowned figure in the custom motorcycle scene, celebrated for transforming ordinary bikes into extraordinary works of art. Fish will take us through his creative process, share stories behind some of his most memorable projects, and discuss the trends and future of motorcycle customization. So let's get ready to talk custom builds and restorations with Fish, right here on the One Gang podcast.
Once that bike was customized, then all we wanted to do was ride.
Of course.
You know, I was infatuated with it.
Yeah.
You know, I remember that Ironhead. I had more stuff strapped to that sissy bar riding. As a joke, I'd go to the fish market and pick up fresh fish for dinner, strapped to the sissy bar and ride it back. You know what I mean?
Hey, One Gang, if you enjoy the podcast, please don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. You can turn notifications on to hear when new episodes are dropped, too. Any of your engagement supports the show and helps us book great guests and keeps us going. If you or a friend would make a great guest, hit us up at cyclesworldwide.com or drop a comment. Thank you guys so much.
One Gang Worldwide podcast, brought to you by Keyboard Motorcycle Shipping. Since 1978, Keyboard Motorcycle Shipping has been the trusted name in transporting motorcycles safely across the country. With custom designed pallets and air ride trailers, your bike is secure and protected every step of the way. By choosing Keyboard Motorcycle Shipping, you're supporting a dedicated small business that prioritizes quality and customer satisfaction. Ship with a peace of mind, knowing your motorcycle is in expert hands.
Please visit shippingmymotorcycle.com. That's shippingmymotorcycle.com. And now, back to our show.
All right, One Gang, welcome to the show. Today we've got James Fish Alcorn of Alleyway Kustoms, typically known as Fish. Not many know his real name. So you heard it here first. Welcome to the show, Fish. We appreciate you coming in, man.
Hey, how are you guys? Thanks so much for having me, man. I dig what you guys do, man. I've been checking out a couple of the episodes, and it's a cool, different kind of podcast. I like it a lot.
Thanks, brother. Thanks. Appreciate that very
Thanks,
much. All right, let's kick it off, man. Let's get a little bit into where you grew up. What were you like as a kid, man? We know what you're doing now. Give us the young Fish.
Well, so I was born in Jacksonville, Florida. I grew up in Jacksonville Beach, Florida, and there's 3 different beach towns: Jacksonville Beach, Neptune Beach, and Atlantic Beach. And you know, being able to go to the beach every day, you know, it was awesome childhood growing up. My mom and dad were super cool. You know, we didn't have the world,
Nice.
but we didn't really go without. You know what I mean? And so I kind of you know, let's see where we could start. I started playing soccer because my mom and dad coached the beaches, basically like the little league of soccer before it was a sport in the early 80s.
Right,
You know, that was
right.
accepted by the United States really as a sport. So I played a lot of soccer, and then I ended up playing on a like an advanced team
Nice.
that was called the Jaguars, coincidentally with the NFL
Yeah,
team, but it was called the
right.
Jaguars back then. And they did a lot more, you know, I don't know how to put it, just what kind of like a small amateur league, you know. And a segue to that is that they wanted me to play soccer in high school. And, you know, growing up as a skinny kid, you got picked on in school, you know what I mean? And didn't really fit in. Playing, the football coach was also the soccer coach. And my real soccer coach on the Jaguars team was a guy from Brazil. His name was Tony. He played on a league or on a professional team called the Jacksonville T-Men, which was from New England. So I was kind of getting exposed to the real deal. And this football coach was just picking on us, and, you know, kind of that sort of thing. And I think that's what kind of I gravitated towards something other than team sports,
Right.
and stuff like that, you know, which is what got me into skateboarding. We changed neighborhoods, and the neighborhood I moved to, I was the new kid, and the older kids were building quarter pipes in their driveways. And that was my first exposure to something that you could be accepted in that wasn't, you know, the standard you play baseball, you play football, you play whatever. And nothing against any of that stuff, but you just kind of find your place. And I think that's where, it kind of all started with getting into my first association with counterculture, I think was with skateboarding. You know what I mean?
Yeah, definitely
For sure. Yep. What about
When it wasn't accepted,
you
wasn't accepted
you
sport.
right?
Yeah.
Back, yeah.
And you said earlier that you did some you jammed too, right?
Yeah. I my father was he was kind of a hippie, but he was a folk singer, musician. And down in St. Augustine, they had this festival, and all that stuff was really,
That's wild.
back in the early 70s, I had pictures of him up on the balconies in the St. Augustine streets where he's up there playing acoustic with like another guy jamming, you know what I mean? And
Dang.
but I
That's
never
awesome.
really learned how to play much music with him. That kind of came later when I got talked into being an upright bass player in a rockabilly band with some guys that I was building some cars with,
Sick.
and that was, I didn't really agree to do that. They heard that I had kind of played a little bit of electric bass, and I was like, guys, I can't even complete a song. They're like, oh, we got a show booked. They were already an established band.
Right.
And it was a guy from Los Angeles, Diego. He played guitar and sang, and my friend Shay from Atlanta that's built a lot of panheads. He played drums, and they just didn't like their bass player
Sweet.
because he wouldn't show up on time. So they fired him and kind of showed me a little bit of how to play, and then it was off from there.
What kind of music? What kind
particular
of
band.
music were you guys jamming to?
I was a rockabilly band, and that was late 90s,
Right.
and so all that stuff was real popular. Like that, they had that swing resurgence that kind of brought it all back. But those guys were on an indie label.
Right. Wow.
And had already they had already put out a record. I was just buddies with them, and I was getting involved in cars a little bit because I had already done some bike stuff, and I hooked up with now my closest friend Mike Wilson, who was building a lot of cars, and we traded my first bike for a car, and they got me into building and chopping 50s and 40s and 30s cars at this shop.
What was that first car?
The first car was a 53 Dodge 2-door, which looks a lot like a 53 Chevy Bel Air.
Yeah.
But it was, one that it wasn't a Chevy or a Ford. So it was kind of like an expendable car to all those guys had 3 or 4 cars at a time. And, the shop that I just moved from, was the shop that we all built cars in.
No kidding.
Back
That's cool.
20 years ago.
Damn.
Mike still held on to it. Yeah. So,
Hey, Fish.
that's
Sorry to
Go for
interrupt. I want to ask you. So is Mike the one who kind of got you influenced in the path you're going to now?
one of the ones.
Take us into a little bit of that. Like, what inspired you, or sparked your interest in whether it was motorcycles, working on cars, doing that type of stuff at a young age?
So, I bought my first Harley. I've never really had another bike other than a Harley. My 2 buddies were riding, and we were involved in a little bit of like, kind of street gang shenanigans. We'll leave it at that. We were all kind of in the same little brother club together, and they got into Harleys because they were making pretty good money. And my best friend at the time was one of 2 of those guys, and there was a kind of a distance within the clique of people that we were hanging out with and going seeing hardcore shows and punk rock shows and stuff like that. And they got into riding Harleys on the weekends, and that was Jerry Temple and my friend Sarge. And finally, after, on a Sunday, we were all going out looking for a place to go hang out and party and listen to music. And they were riding where we were going, and we were all following them. And they're like, man, you really need to get a bike.
Right.
So Jerry's brother loaned me $4,000 to buy this stock-ish 1971 Harley Ironhead that was in a 69 frame.
That's awesome.
So in my upbringing at home, no tattoos, no motorcycles. That was the rules. So I got my first tattoo when I was able to at 18. It was my family's last name. And my family saw it a year we were decorating the Christmas tree, and they got pissed.
You
well,
hid it for that long, huh?
Yeah, it's on my arm, and but they couldn't get that mad because it was the last name of the family. You know what I mean?
Right.
So,
right.
but there was also no mopeds, no motorcycles, no dirt bikes, no two-wheeled stuff.
Ah,
So
dang.
when I got into motorcycles with this bike, I literally couldn't ride. I had no idea how to ride. And those guys had to teach me in like a Kmart parking lot.
Right.
And that was, initiation and trial by fire. Cause, I got going around good enough in the parking lot. They're like, that's good enough. Let's go hit the titty bar and go drinking. I'm like, all right. Which, I knew the state of mind at that bar, after a bunch of beers, I was like, how am I going to get home?
Right.
And that those guys started hanging out with a bunch of club guys, because in your mid 20s, back in the mid 90s, there's no one of the younger age group to have gone riding with.
Right.
There just didn't exist.
Right.
There might've been one or two people on different sides of town, and Jacksonville's a really big town, so there might've been a couple people on the west side, a couple people at the beach, a couple people on the south side, but it wasn't enough that everybody'd go meet up at some place to get tacos like it is now. And there was no way to connect with those people because you had beepers. You know what I mean? So the only people to continue the trial by fire is to go hang out with some, pretty heavy club people.
Right.
And then you go ride with them. And I didn't realize that education I was getting
For sure.
back then. I remember the first clubhouse party I went to, I was like, we had started cutting some bikes up and doing some choppers with the local shop and stuff. And I was expecting to see just this sea of long bikes and choppers. When I got there, I was like, what's up with these Evos and Softails? They're like, no, we can ride across the country. You can't ride across the country on a chopper anymore. And I didn't understand, but that's the way,
Right.
back then, the beginnings of the Evo motor stuff and how Evo motors weren't really obtainable. Like an Evo crate motor, like those guys kind of were like, they're happy we were hanging out. We all got along real good. And I still got some good friends, they're involved in stuff. And, but they were like, man, you guys can't go riding with us on shovel heads and pan heads and this iron head. You need to get Evos.
That's
right.
Put some Evos in woods. So the bike that I ended up getting after that iron head was basically a shovel head that had an Evo swap. So it was 4-speed kick only, 4-over, wide glide front end. And we all rode 8-pounders.
Right. Of course.
We all, because, we didn't have the means to really customize anything like that. I hardtailed that 71 iron head with a guy from the club with the hardtail section. One winter, we all changed the bikes up.
Right.
And my buddy Sarge's bike, he put it in a rigid frame. I made mine a rigid frame. We bought long front ends, and, come spring, we were riding all different customized bikes. And that was really, with references of Easy Rider photos and stuff like that. But I was getting education from those two guys, and it really wasn't much. Unless you whipped open an Easy Rider magazine, we built all our bikes to look like Dave Mann paintings.
That's right.
And I know that's a real, maybe a cliche thing to say now.
But it was
all the influence on all those.
Those paintings are so influential. There's so many, especially in that time frame where, no question. That badass paintings, by the way.
And and the detail of them, people say it all the time, but you can see that Dave Mann built bikes. You could see the difference in primaries, foot control configurations, and there's still to this day a ridiculously good reference on the different styles and how to build one correctly from those periods. It's ridiculous, but it kind of went from that. And what was happening is people would get into different stuff, and my buddies would sell their bikes. And I decided I would just, as much as it came around and I'd have to get a bike back or whatever, when, hey, we're all on the bikes again, we're all going to go riding. I'm like, well, all right. So I just held on to mine.
Right.
And things kind of came and went. And that's when I hooked up with Mike Wilson, I used to skateboard with. He built Stone Edge Skate Park in Daytona. He's from Daytona. And I grew up at Kona Skate Park in Jacksonville, which was like I call it a boys club all the time. It was every kid's home, because you get dropped off at 10 o'clock in the morning and get picked up at 10 o'clock at night. The parents loved it.
Yeah.
It was daycare.
That's right.
But But when I got old enough to travel and got better at skateboarding and got sponsored and stuff, Daytona Park was the place to be. And Mike and I had met down there, even though we weren't very good friends. Mike started tattooing shortly afterwards, and I started getting tattoos. He started working for Inc. Smith and Rogers in Jacksonville. And I actually went in with a buddy of mine to get a street gang tattoo that Frank Lee did on my buddy. And Frank Lee wasn't there. And Mike was. And Mike's like, don't you remember me? And Mike had like a pompadour, rockabilly haircut, and there was like a dress code at Inc. Smith where you all had to wear slacks and bowlers. Eric Inc. Smith like enforced that. So back at Stone Edge, Mike had long hair. And he was friends with this other guy, Jason Brown, who had long hair too, which, you know, some guys had long hair, a lot of people didn't, you know. But I didn't recognize him. So we started talking, and we kind of hit it off. And, you know, he let me drive. He had a Riviera. I think it was a 72 boat tail Riviera that he had just got done building, had the big block built and bored out. And that was a crazy fast car.
That's a beautiful car.
And I didn't, yeah, it was crazy purple. Purple's one of Mike's favorite colors. And they were putting on a rockabilly show downtown in Jacksonville, and Mike wasn't in town. And all the guys that worked at Inc. Smith all had old cars, and so did Eric. And I just got infatuated with it, you know? And Mike's like, I won't be in town. Well, why don't you drive this car to this thing downtown? And just so we're representing, we're having as many cars as we can. And I drove that car downtown, and I was like, man, you know, I've been, I mean, bikes are, a sketchy thrill too, but a fast car like that, man, I was like,
at a young
I gotta
age,
get a car.
no question.
Yeah, I got to get a car. So I ended up buying a 67 Malibu that I ended up customizing. And it was a running car, but that's when I started learning how to do like body work and paint informally at that old shop at the other place. And 3 guys that tattooed all shared that shop, but it was a hangout. And at night, everybody go over there and get beers and hang out, and you start learning. And Mike and I started pursuing how to learn how to MIG weld.
That's awesome.
So we could subframe cars and, do cross members for 700 R4s and learn how to chop tops. And, so we chopped quite a few tops over there. I did my 51 Ford. We did a 46 Chevy. And at that time, again, with the no reference, fortunately, Mike he still is, his house looks like a library of books. And he had all the Barris books and books on Larry Watson and, how to lead and all this stuff. And so we just started, screwing our own stuff up.
Yep.
And
trial and error,
riding down the road.
Cool.
Ride down the road. Every place we went, every stoplight was a drag race, and we were living it up, building cars, playing music. And, that was probably truly my first influence into the painting and the counterculture and the Robert Williams.
That's cool.
Mike had books on Robert Williams and, the books on Von Dutch and learning how to pinstripe. I was messing up pinstriping way back then, putting stuff out that, you get lucky on a good weekend when your lines aren't blown out and messed up and you pinstripe somebody's flames, and we were just, doing it up. So
that's cool.
But there's a lot of that going on,
Yeah. So, Fish, every builder has that initial leap where passion becomes the pursuit. How did you go from being interested in bikes to actually working on them?
So I had a construction company with my friend Sarge that I told you guys about. And we were we always had a bike we were riding and a project going on, And so
what were those first projects like?
Well, this is right about the time. This is we did all those Dave Mann bikes in the late 90s, and then in the 2000s was about the fat tire craze.
Right.
And we had here we had Billy Lane with Chopper's Inc., which I thought that his early style, before it really went hubless and all that stuff, his early style, we were just infatuated with. And so we were trying to build some bikes like his we were working with a couple local shops because we knew people, and some people had passed on and other shops opened up. So we were kind of going to those shops to get advice and help with the mechanical end of things. And we're trying to customize elsewhere. So we built a couple bikes very similar to, I love Billy's bike, the Devil in the Red Dress.
Yeah, it's a beautiful
red
bike.
panhead.
Yep.
Yeah. So I had a project like that going on, kind of with the DNA rolling chassis. The guy at the local shop, he was a custom chrome dealer. So we got the whole kit, Springer front end, 21 front, 16 rear, and then, you know, just kind of built off of there. So when the economy crashed in 2008, I was in the middle of doing a different band and traveling and touring. And when that kind of came to a close, I met my wife, and she kind of saw what was going on in our bike, the Death Machine that I'm looking at. I was completing that bike when we met. We took the first ride on our first date on it, and
that's awesome.
yeah.
So you go from a kid who can't have a motorcycle to building your own death machine.
Just in it. And that bike,
I love it, man.
That bike, the Death Machine, is my buddy of the two guys that got me, not Sarge, but the other guy, Jerry Temple. That's his bike.
Yeah.
That's the frame. It used to have a 57 panhead in it.
No way.
And that's his bike. That's why I can't sell it. But all the shops called Jerry's bike the Death Machines and Death Traps. So that's why the bike's called the Death Machine.
The Death Machine.
But
Jerry's the one that lent you the money for your first bike.
Yeah,
right?
him and his brother. And his brother's
that's cool.
Yeah, his
man.
brother's still
What a
alive,
cool-
man. Jerry's unfortunately passed. But so anyway, when I met my wife, I was finishing the 2.0 version of the Death Machine, and she's like, we really hit it off. And she's like, well, you know, the bike, I had just some BS paint job on it, and all of the stuff that needed chroming was just sanded and rattle can clear coated so it wouldn't rust, because I was still living in Jacksonville Beach and stuff would rust overnight, you know. And so she and I contracted my friend Josh from Fat American Choppers to paint it. And that's, I don't know if you can see it. That's this gas tank that says the Death Machine on it.
Oh, cool.
So he did that paint job, and we chromed everything and did it up, and me and her rode around a bunch on that bike. And I was working at a cabinet shop when my band was not touring, and I hated it, even though those guys were great friends of mine. And I couldn't get my act together, man. I was partying too hard, and you get put in that band lifestyle. It's just a constant party. And you know, I wasn't myself, you know, and my wife really helped me turn it around. And I got completely sober for a year and a half. And she said, awesome. Well, you know, you can't. I moved into her house, and we rented out all of our property in Jacksonville Beach. And she's like, well, this has been fun, but you kind of need to do something.
Right.
Like, all right, you know,
do something with your life.
And
how old are you at this point?
This was 13 years ago.
13 years ago. Okay.
So I was 40, just turned 40. And I had done some tooled leather seats, the seat that's on the Death Machine right now, the koi fish scene. I had started doing tooled leather, and she's like, well, it looks like, you know, you're pretty good at some of this stuff. Why don't you give it a run and get out of my 3-car garage that you've taken over and get a storage unit. And, you know, she's like, I got us for a little bit, not for a long time.
An awesome chick.
Yeah.
Man.
And
that's killer.
She supported me just trying to give it a shot. Right. So I still had all these projects that were going on, and there was a big void. A good friend of ours, Bubba, who worked at the very first motorcycle shop that I had my Ironhead at. He was our go-to guy, and he had just passed. And the shop was shut down, and there was a couple of the mechanics I stayed friends with there. They, you know, they were just kind of in limbo, not really needing to work. You know, they're the older guys.
Yeah.
And so there was a guy that his name was Doc, and he came out to my first storage unit shop, and we started putting bikes together. And my wife Dina thought that I was going to be like a leather guy, and I made a good run. I made a good run at it, but you guys know as well as I do how long I call it the guitar pick pancake style seat that was popular with like horseback street choppers era. I mean, my window had passed to that was losing popularity. I was basically offering a seat with a tooled art design on it, and I couldn't get
Yeah.
$700 for that.
No,
And I'm like,
no.
Yeah.
you're getting a tattoo and a seat.
And at that time too,
Made
so many manufacturers were putting out production seats that were now being sold everywhere, from LaPera to Mustang to all this. So,
right.
you know, people are going to pay a little bit less, and that's a shame, because it became kind of a little bit of a lost art almost.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I just what I started doing is I was buying shovel heads from wherever, Craigslist, and turn them into full fender bikes, making sure they had a title. And me and this guy Doc would get them running, and I'd paint them. And I was painting in the same small storage unit with a box fan taped off. I'd tarp everything, and I didn't even really know how to cut and buff at this point, you know. And he knew how to paint a little bit, and I learned that unfortunately he had a little bit of a substance problem, you know, and that didn't work out long term. But I continued to do it. I had some other, I knew a lot of people from those shops. So my friend Stefan from Gainesville, I'd pay him, I think it was $250 to come up from Gainesville. I'm like, man, I got a climber manual. I can't get this primary together. I struggled with stuff like that. I couldn't get, you know, basic carburetor tuning and jetting and stuff like that. You know, the basics, I didn't have the knowledge. So I just basically for a handful of years started paying these guys for an education. And, you know, Stefan coming up from Gainesville wasn't working out. I got kicked out of the first storage unit, and I got the guys who were helping me at the cabinet shop, being good friends that they are, Rick and my friend Derek. They had they had like 6 different units in a storage one right across from them that they stored all their wood in. And I was like, man, I'm in a bad way. I got nowhere to put the minimal amount of equipment I had. They're like, hey, give us like 2 weeks. We'll just gut that thing. And I skipped everybody in line that was waiting for that storage unit. And everybody helped me out. So at that point, I had a little storage unit to do mechanical stuff in, and I was renting another storage unit to paint in with a box fan, that whole deal. And I just started flipping cone shovel heads. And what I found that with my leather seat, the pogo seat that I still will manufacture and produce with the 1/2-inch foam on it, that had the low profile and it looked good. It wasn't all poofy. So that, with a little bit of custom paint, I understood the principles of paint panels and how you paint the lighter color first, tape it, that's your pinstripe color. You do 2 tones, nothing too complicated. Do a stick-on tank emblem. And man, I'd put them on eBay and I'd run them and I'd test the waters.
Nice.
You know? And, you know, that kind of just started eventually launching it further and further, and you'd sell a bike for way more money than, you know, I started selling to collectors all over the country. And that kind of launched it, you know?
Fish, let me ask you this, man. I mean, you're largely self-taught, learn from friends, mentors, as you were growing up in this thing. You did a lot of hands-on as far as, I mean, like you said, you paid for an education, meaning you paid these guys to do the work while you learned how to do it. What about the painting part of it? How did you pick that up, man? Because I've seen your work and it's incredible, but were you always artistic growing up, or is this something that just kind of took some time to develop?
Well, my dad was an artist, and we did plenty of doodling when I was a kid. You know, he did watercolors and oil paintings, and you know, but I think he was fairly informally trained. I'd have to ask my mom. He's passed now.
Sorry, man.
So I had a little bit of that's all right. I had a little bit of noodling background going on with that, but at the shop that I was doing cars at, there was this guy named Ron. He's still alive, and he worked. That was a car lot, still is, and he was a painter at night. After he delivered organs during the day for the Mayo Clinic, he'd come there at night for some extra scratch. And he'd be over there painting a Honda Civic bumper or whatever. And he had a bunch of old cars. So he'd come over to see what we were messing up, you know? So he kind of got where he put a spray gun in our hand and, you know, kind of got where we had a working knowledge of how that went. But I think, you know, I took a class in 2018 called the Brushmaster's Getaway. And that was out in Kentucky. And, you know, honestly, I remember at that, when I moved the shop out of where the cabinet shop was at over to where we were building cars, Man, every morning when I was sitting on the toilet using the bathroom, I would scroll through the early days of Instagram, and I would get
Yeah.
so disappointed at the work I was about to go do and the level that I was painting at and the level of
Seeing
work that
highlights.
was on the internet, and
Yeah.
part of the reason why I and the shop are so well rounded is because we had to do stuff out of necessity. Those early bikes, we couldn't
Mhm.
afford paint jobs, we couldn't afford seats, all that stuff. You know what I mean? So I saw the instructors at this class that were going to be there, and an instructor from Japan. He's called Center Roots. His name's Masa, and I really really liked all of his work a lot. And he was going to be there, and I thought that was amazing. Gene Winfield was going to be there, a handful of other people that I didn't really know very well. Um, Buck Wild, Mike Ramirez was going to be there. I got to know Gerald Tidwell a little bit there. And so I signed up and I told the wife, I was like, I need to do this.
Right.
I need to, I need to go
Yeah.
and figure out what's missing here. I was having so many different issues with all the little basics of things. And I went there with an 8-page notebook paper for all my notes. And I paid for the VIP treatment where you're supposed to be able to have more one-on-one hands-on time with the instructors.
Right.
And
Did that happen?
well, the VIP thing really wasn't a VIP thing, but the good thing about
Okay.
it is that since there was a hotel and there was a farm, and it was a big distance away. So the VIP thing, if you didn't rent a car, it was supposed to be a shuttle that took you back and forth. Well, there was no shuttle.
Jesus.
So yeah, I mean, I could go on about it. I try to stay positive about it. I met some good people there, and a lot of them were in the parking lot in the morning trying to figure out how you're going to get to the farm. So I met some people that were way more established than I was in the
crazy.
industry. And I also met some of what I didn't know were the instructors there. And I got to ride with them in a car there. And that was the true one-on-one beginning of the one-on-one experience, And the Brushmasters Getaway was that particular year. I don't know how it is now. I still think it's a good thing. But it was whatever you made of it. And it was very, very informal. The next class was, this is what it is. And they have easels set up and some airbrushes and some candies. And they kind of show you some stuff. And they were still trying to figure out who's intermediate, who's middle,
Right,
who's
right,
advanced, whatever, So you'd sit there, you try to absorb as much as you could at the class. But afterwards, the instructors that were cool would hang out. And I just walk up and introduce
Nice.
myself and be like, hey, I got some questions here.
Right.
You got a second to help? And 3 or 4 of those sessions turned into a 45-minute session
Nice.
of other people that were standing around that either had the same questions or had the same
Sweet.
interest. So it kind of worked out and benefited, man. And I think some people were kind of clowning my notebook at first there, but at the end, we all kind of benefited a little bit.
Right.
And
Yeah.
got to spend a little bit of
Yeah,
time
jackpot.
really with some guy. It was a very hands-on deal, but you're only gonna learn so much in a couple of days.
That's right.
You got to get back and start putting in the work. And but we had at that point, then I had the tools to just go back home and start putting in the work.
Yep. Was your first sessions like? But you were painting way before then, right? I mean, you were working on your own stuff, and take us a little bit into like some of the first bikes you painted and what took place as far as that trial and error part.
Well, we were laying out flame jobs building those cars way back before there was ever Alleyway. That was a big deal to try to, that was a spruce up for a paint job, and all of the suede paint jobs were popular, and you could take a car and blast 12 cans of rattle can primer on it and throw some flames on it.
Right.
And you were good. You know what I mean? So there was a lot of that going on. And then that transferred into my iron head. When it was chopped, I put an 8-over Paco Springer on it and 16-inch ape hangers, and it had a Sportster tank. And my buddies, Sarge and JT, they would kind of make fun of me because they're like, what color is the bike going to be this week? And 1 week it was camouflage. 1 week it was rattle can, purple sparkle with yellow flames or whatever,
Right.
And we'd take, the tank came on and off. I could paint the tank at night on a Saturday. Sunday we'd go hit all the bars and bum out the you know, the Rolex rider dudes, because, you know, we were kickstart only,
Right,
straight
right,
pipes,
right.
loud,
Loud and proud,
tattooed,
baby.
you
Loud
know?
and
Yeah.
proud.
Yeah, man.
For sure.
So all those paint jobs got shown on a Sunday where people were just like, there was a bar on the Intercoastal that everybody from all over town hit these probably 5 different bars. There was one on the boardwalk at the beach called the Crab Pot. I forget what the one on the
Yep.
Intercoastal would be, but you know, everybody would run by 3 or 4 in the afternoon at that bar. It was hopping. It was jumping. We get there early and I'd park that bike right out front on the sidewalk where you'd have to walk by it. We'd all sit up there on the balcony drinking beers, waiting for people to say something about it.
Right. That's cool, man.
Yeah.
That's cool. Yeah.
But-
That's cool.
But you know, it was a lot of that stuff, you know. But you know, back at that time period in the late 90s, I remember my buddies, they'd save change in a big water bottle you get filled up at Winn-Dixie or whatever grocery store. And all that change
Yep.
was your $600 budget you had for your bike paint job. And there was the guys that were each motorcycle shop's painter, and they just cut you a deal. Yeah, how much money you got? I got some blue, I got some green. What color you like? Yeah, I'll shoot it blue for $400. How about that?
Right.
You know, and that's kind of how that went. So, you know, for us to have a nice paint job on a bike way back then was a lot, you know. But before I went to Brushmasters, it was just, you know, kind of two-tone. I was going up to the local Napa, you know, in the commercial department, trying to buy some cool colors.
Were you a
Spend a little
natural?
bit more.
Yeah.
Were you a natural? Some guys are just natural the first time they try it, and some guys it takes a long time to do it. Did you feel kind of like you picked it up right away?
A little bit more painting than mechanical. I didn't really have a mechanical aptitude at all until I bought a Harley
Right.
and broke down. And those 2 guys that taught me all about that wrenching,
Didn't have a choice.
I mean, they're like, here's all the tools you need, pack a tool roll. We don't care if it scratches up the frame. And when your bike breaks down, you know, we'd ride 60 miles from Jacksonville to Fernandina Beach, you know, and we're balls to the wall,
Of course.
everything rattling, you know, and we didn't know nothing about Loctite barely, or really how to do it right, you know. So we'd pull over
Yeah.
and you know, you pull out your tool roll, and those guys wouldn't work on my stuff for me. They're like, we're gonna sit here and make fun of you until you get
Made
it back
you
together,
learn.
you know.
That's cool.
And made
That's awesome.
yeah, and I wouldn't trade it for nothing, you know what I mean? And then
Yeah.
you know, from that was when I started doing the car stuff, because you know, there was at the beginning of the bikes, it was all about riding on the weekend. Once that bike was customized, then all we wanted to do was ride
Of
'em,
course.
you know. And I was
Yeah.
was infatuated with it,
Yeah,
you
man.
know. I remember that Ironhead. I had more stuff strapped to that sissy bar riding as a joke. I'd go to this fish market and pick up fresh fish for dinner, strap it to the sissy bar and ride it back. I was, you know what I mean? You're like, you're that jazzed about your new
That's
thing.
so
You're
funny,
doing
dude.
it. You know, you're into it. You know what I mean? But it wasn't until after, I think after the car stuff, when we actually had a little bit of money to play with, because we were making pretty good money at that time doing construction. You know what I mean? And we could get an 80 cubic inch RevTech motor in a transmission and build a project. And, you know, we were going to swap meets, buying junk. We didn't know really what it was. And those older guys were helping us figure it out, you know. But the mechanical stuff came hard. It really did. You know what I mean?
It's
And
not
just
an easy thing,
being
for
able-
sure. For sure. I agree with you 100%.
No,
If you don't have that aptitude or you grow up in it, I didn't either, man. It was something that I had to learn over time as I watched the guys in the shop and learn from them. But yeah, it's not an easy thing for sure.
Yeah, I mean, it literally was how to take your skateboard apart and put it back together. That's all. I could work a socket, you know, and you barely drill a hole and put a wood screw in your rails that go on the deck. I didn't know about any of that stuff, you know, really, you know. But then all of a sudden you're putting stuff together to go 80 miles an hour down the road and trying to kill yourself. Trial by fire.
Trial by fire, baby.
You know?
The bearings are a little bit different.
Yeah.
So take
Hey guys, the show will be back in 1 minute right after a word from our sponsor.
Hey, One Gang, tired of feeling like your butt's taking more of a beating than your bike on those long rides? Introducing Butt Buffer, the ultimate solution to saddle soreness. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. These cushions are made from medical-grade viscoelastic polymer, scientifically crafted to eliminate pressure points and keep your circulation flowing. No more numb nuts or numb butts. And here's the best part. Butt Buffer cushions are made right here in the U.S. for the last 30 years. From Harleys to Hondas, we've got a cushion to fit your ride
perfectly. Plus, with styles ranging from sleek pebble polymer to luxurious sheepskin, there's a butt buffer for every rider's style. Get your butt buffer today at buttbuffer.com. That's buttbuffer.com. Your butt will thank you, and you'll ride longer and happier. We've got your butt covered.
Take us from this period where you're hitting up swap meets and buying junk and putting together whatever you can to actually starting Alleyway Kustoms. What inspired you to actually launch it, and what was your vision for the business when you started it?
So truthfully, I was inspired when my band was traveling and touring. I had a 4-piece band called Kings of Hell. We were a rockabilly band. We were together about 8 years, toured all over the country at the end. You know, I was inspired by, I always listened to punk rock and hardcore music, and Roger Merritt from Agnostic Front had a side like street punk band, and he had a clothing line that was called like American Made or something like that. And he told me, and another friend of mine, Walt Richards from Hot Rod Walt and the Psycho DeVilles, he's like, man, Hot Rod Walt is a self-made man, and his merch line, he's like, that merch line makes me $40,000 a year. It's not the records, it's not the gigs. So
it's the merch.
Yeah, I did Alleyway Kustoms as a merchandise line
Really?
for when we were traveling.
No way.
Yeah, and Alleyway
way.
started from in Jacksonville Beach at the house that I was born in, off of 3rd Street, A1A, was my grandfather's property. And it was an apartment, a duplex, upstairs, downstairs, up front, and 2 small apartments in the back. And when he survived Pearl Harbor, he moved here from Pennsylvania onto that property. And I was, after 2008, when the economy crashed, I had to kind of back it up a notch, and I moved back over there. I couldn't afford a lot of the stuff that I had at the time, the house I was renting and all that stuff. So that's where I was based out of when I was doing the band stuff. So Alleyway comes from the two garages in the back alley that's a connecting side street of my grandfather's property.
Yeah, cool.
That's why it's called Alleyway. Yep. So
that's awesome.
So when the wife, girlfriend at the time, gave me kind of the green light, we were getting serious. We knew we were going to be together, you know, so we were kind of making plans for the future. And when she gave me the green light to try to make a go at doing seats, and she didn't know I was starting to kind of really pursue getting bikes together, I already had a couple t-shirt designs. I already had the name, you know, and it was kind of taking off from there. But, you know, I just wanted to make enough money to survive doing it. And I wanted a panhead, and I wanted, you know, the stuff that you dream of having.
That's right.
You know?
Yeah.
She and I had bought a 1930 Model A and did it up together. Right about the time we did the Death Machine. We bought a Model A and did it up. And I just started slowly the pattern that I think a business owner does when you're trying to make it. And, you know, this stuff, there's no handbook to doing this. You know, you got to figure it out. And I feel like I have sold less things that were dear to me than a lot of people might have had to. You know what I mean? I sold that Model A, and, you know, just kept rolling it over into the next. I was always really, and have been told by a couple people that I'm good about saving money, you know, and putting money where it needs to go, and not spending it until you're achieving those goals. So, you know, the first bike that I really sold that I was getting together with that guy Doc was a Shovelhead. It was set up a lot like the Devil in the Red Dress bike, but, you know, I was in a rut in my hometown and was partying a lot, and those guys were riding and stuff too. But, you know, not to talk bad about anybody or anything, but the mindset, I had to get out of the mindset of you can't do it. You can't, you know, that bike will only be worth set amount of money. And I thought about it all the time, and this was never said, but if I would have looked at some guys that I was hanging out with back then, they would have told me I would have never sold that bike for more than $7,000. And I sold it to a collector on eBay for $15,000.
Bam.
And I took that money. Now I had to learn basic photography, because no one ever told me this, but I felt like you needed good representation of your product. And again, my wife helping me out again. She's a sweetheart. She bought a digital camera, and she's a great photographer.
Nice.
Well, she thought that digital camera was going to be for us to goof around with. I immediately
it turned into the photo sheet.
I immediately studied every book she bought on photography, how to use that camera. And then I started, because I had basic photography in high school. They had a couple photography programs that were pretty decent. And I took art class in high school too. So there's not like whatever you're going to get from your art class
Right.
when you're a teenager and unfocused, there were some basics there. But anyway, I took those, and put that particular bike on eBay with photos that I took of it at the end of our neighborhood still by a lake. And I could write a story because I was writing music. I wrote 3 records with Kings of Hell. I wrote the music and the lyrics for it.
Man.
Yeah. So I could put a story together about the bike. And that was the recipe for a little while, that you could put a bike up on eBay. Don't be a douche about it, but talk it up, and have some good photos to represent it. And that ended up being a really good recipe. That bike that I sold to the collector, I bought a 1969 pan shovel from a guy in Daytona. And I bought a 1948 S&S panhead basket case replica bike. The plan was to keep the panhead and build the 69 shovel head, which ended up turning into a bike that was called the Sheriff Special, because that was a cop bike from Dallas. So I built that bike up, finished both of the bikes. I was learning how to paint a little bit better. Backing up was before the Brushmasters thing. And I ended up selling both those bikes and kept rolling it over and over and over, and funding more projects, funding more equipment, and just building up everything that I saw on the internet that was a missing link. I knew if I wanted the bikes to be representative of what I wanted to do, I had to learn how to do all that stuff.
Serge has sold so many bikes over the years, and we have talked about it at length's end, the difference between successfully listing a bike and just slapping pictures up on a marketplace or eBay or wherever. It makes all the difference in the world to have a quality 360 video, good pictures, everything else. It's night and day for actually successfully selling a bike. But the last part of my question is, did you know right out of the gate what kind of style, what kind of bikes and the style that you wanted to pursue and focus on? Or did you kind of still have that sort of scattered taste that you had prior?
I still had the bikes I wanted to do, and then there was the bikes that I needed to do. I needed to do bikes with suspension, because guys that can afford the bikes I was trying to do, they don't want to ride a hardtail.
Right.
You know what I mean? Still don't want to ride a hardtail predominantly, but our bikes go to different types of places as a riding piece of art presently. But back then I had to do what I needed to do, so I capitalized on the pogo seat. We're doing a cowhide leather version of that at the time. So that's an Alleyway signature thing. And I just did what I had to do. But that's why the Death Machine was around, That's why that 48 panhead replica was purchased, because I was like, well, this is what I like.
Right.
And this is what we're going to hold on to. And this is what we're going to put out to keep the ball rolling.
That's right.
But the purpose the dual purpose to go into Brushmasters and get an education on paint is because I felt like, and I saw what was going on social media, I felt like I could make a good living doing the paint, and I did for a number of years afterwards, and still do, but you got to find I feel like the recipe is you got to find your side hustle that makes the money, and then also do what you're passionate about.
Right.
Type deal. So I don't know.
Hey, did your dad, random question, but did your dad ever get to paint a bike?
No. Funny story. I think my dad didn't like, I tried to give my mom that 53 Dodge car when I finished it. The interior was done. I painted it candy apple red with silver flames that matched the gray interior. And
slick.
And my mom and dad would come in town because he got a job transfer to Alabama. And right after high school, the whole family moved 7.5 hours away, and we had a distance. I stayed in Jacksonville because my grandparents lived here, and I ended up taking care of them until they passed. And, but my dad didn't want my mom to have that car. And I had that car, and I had my chopped Ford that I had built, and my dad was super into Bob Dylan because he was, folk singer and everything. And Bob Dylan was the man. So I wanted to paint that chopped car blue with flames and call it Tangled Up in Blue and give it to my dad. And he broke my heart and told me he didn't want it. I was like, he didn't mean anything by it.
No.
But I love my dad, But I was like, man, all right. He just wasn't, he wasn't into it. And I
Yeah.
think that if he was still alive, the way this is, that he would be into
You
it.
could have yoked him into it.
Especially the hand brushing things and the pinstripe angle of stuff.
That's
But
awesome.
yeah, my mom
Yeah.
wanted that 53 Dodge. I let her drive it. My mom
Yeah.
she still wants an old car, but my dad, I'll just give you the car. You know, I had the construction company,
Right.
and you know, I loved my parents dearly, and I was
Uh-huh.
like, just take the car. And he was smart though. He knew that if it made it up to Alabama, they didn't have anybody to work on it if it broke.
Right.
You know what I
That's what
mean?
I was wondering. Yeah, he was thinking of it being a money or a time pit. That
Yeah.
makes
Yep.
sense.
Hey,
But I wish I could have done some stuff with him.
Fish, let me ask you this, buddy. Obviously, overcoming challenges as a small business owner, a lot of things don't get, a lot of people don't know who never have done. So let's get in a little bit into that. Running a custom motorcycle business obviously isn't an easy thing in the beginning. What were some of the challenges you faced early on? How did you overcome them? Take us a little bit into the early years of getting that motorcycle shop up and going. What did you specialize in to get that money in? Were you constantly just custom building? Did you do a little service repair? I mean, to get money in, everybody works in different ways to get that cash flowing.
Well, I really struggle with the paperwork documentation on things and taking each customer's job. I mean, everybody can do math, you know, but figuring out the sales tax and the way I guess, to properly keep track of that
Right.
weekly and monthly, I think that's a difficult thing to do. But I think that when, I say Alleyway's, 11 years deep, but when it got really formal over at the car shop, at the car lot shop that we just left from, I had really leaned finally on some of the other guys that were hanging out at that shop that was Bubba's shop. And one guy that I'm still friends with today that just came and helped me work out some kinks on the Vulture bike we just finished for Texas, Paul Rock. Paul Rock built Stroker motors. This is his motor back here.
Oh, nice.
That was a unstreetable 113-inch
Damn.
shovel head
Damn.
back in the day. Yeah, it was called the Peckerhead bike. And there was Paulie, who helped me out a lot with the mechanical end of things and making out what's what on old bikes. What a stock old bikes, like what is this ship linkage piece? What does this go to? What is, all the different little things that make a stock bike a stock bike. And I got really into that for a couple of years. We did a 1940 knucklehead restoration that we inherited that a guy was building with some other guys. They couldn't get it together. But we did a lot of stuff like that. We were trying to handle as much mechanical stuff as we could. I just didn't know, and
Fish, how
I was
how
trying
many
to.
people did you have with you at the time when you started truly forming Alleyway Customs? Like how many guys did you have?
I never really had many more people other than myself.
Oh, no shit. So
You know.
everything, okay.
Yeah, it was me and Paul Rock
Yeah.
would come by on Saturdays, and I'd beg him to. Saturdays was school for 2 years. Every Saturday, not quite every Saturday, but many, many Saturdays he would come by, and everything that I was trying to accomplish in the shop, I'd have 3 bikes on the different lifts, and I'd have this problem with this one. Didn't understand this one. What should I do on this one? And he'd come help me. I owe him the world for coming and helping me figure all that stuff out.
Yeah.
Man, that's
You
cool.
know,
That's cool.
yeah, super, super cool. And we're still great friends. And I don't know what Norm's last name is. Big Norm. He's a master welder. And he taught me. I bought a TIG welder 9 years ago. And he came by with a big rod full of stuff. And he's like, this is what you need for this. This is what you need for this. This is the filler rod you do steel to stainless. And, but those guys kept coming around. I feel, they didn't need me to buy them lunch. They wanted to be there because I was doing the same stuff they were interested
Right.
in, but they also saw, I wasn't giving up. Yeah, I wasn't. It was still 6 days a week, and trying to make all that stuff happen. But it's very difficult to to make a bike shop happen if you're not going to do a lot of I feel like a lot of maintenance and repair, and you don't have some educated MMI guys,
Yeah.
that can come in and handle a lot of stuff like that. Like Jason Hallman, my good friend down in Lakeland that has Cycle Stop USA, his father had a shop that got him into it. And you go down to his shop and it's 5 to 7 bays, 4 people working there. They got a parts counter. It's very, very different. They can handle all of that stuff.
That's right.
That, I don't have the knowledge of every year make and model. I've tried in 11 years to get as much knowledge as possible. You know what I mean? But you got to do what you got to do. And when it doesn't work, you got to keep throwing stuff at the wall.
That's right.
Until it works. But I recently for a time period there, I've been at this new location. This is the 6th year. First 3 years, killed it. Just, better than I had. It was the correct gamble. We needed a professional building. We needed more space. I brought over a mechanic that was working with me, because you're not going to get an MMI guy that's going to come in here and tell you he can time magnetos on Kickstarter only bikes.
Yeah. No way. Way.
You know what I mean?
You need old school.
So
you need old school talent.
It would be a very unique person I'm coming to learn. And I've apprenticed 4 people in 6 years that have worked here, and most of them have found that it's too difficult for whatever reason for them to continue pursuing whatever. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Just because, so for 3 years, we were killing it around here. Last year, I had to go back to working 6 days a week. And I get up at 4:30 in the morning. I'm here, lights are on at the shop at 6 a.m. And I balance that time out by from 6 a.m. to 8 a.m. used to be my personal time.
Right.
For a year, it was problem solving time, project problem solving time. What's behind schedule? How are we going to hustle it?
Right,
You know what I mean?
right.
And you got to just pull the weight and not give up. And that's a lot for some people, man. It is. And I ain't trying to toot our own horn, but we're still throwing stuff at the wall today.
That's right.
With this parts line, I'm making a set of foot controls out there that I was trying to discontinue because it doesn't make sense to make them. Time and money. But a guy was buying some of our new lights. He's a repeat customer. I'm in there doing them.
That's right.
But back to throwing stuff at the wall till you get it to hit. The lights are a hit. The lights we can prototype in-house till we get the designs down. We can sandcast them in-house. Then you can sandcast them through a foundry that does small runs. You can eat a lot of time and money by manually machining them, but you can get 6 lights out here. This is the new diamond light. Then you test the waters and see how it goes. Well, if people are buying them.
Actually,
go ahead.
That answers, I was going to ask you about balancing, but that kind of answers that question, having to go back in for 6 days and balancing that time and sort of block scheduling it out. The other part that I was curious about is how do you balance, or how do you satisfy that artistic vision? And I guess, do you feel like you're still satisfying that artistic vision when you have trends that are constantly changing and, like you're saying, throwing stuff at the wall to see what sticks? Do you still get to scratch that passionate itch that you have, or do you feel like you're doing a lot of chasing of trends, or what does that look like?
If I'm not getting to do something that makes me want to get up in the morning, I'll take a little bit of time and, pursue something that I'm interested in, which is what probably a regular person that doesn't do this for a living would do in their garage as a hobby, that they would be like, oh, I can't wait to work all week. I'm gonna, work on my aluminum welding in my garage at night, or maybe whatever it might be. So I'll take some time, maybe take a whole day and just be like, man, I don't want to hate this place when I come here every day. Right.
Nice.
And
that's smart.
But the cool thing about what we get to do is that, we kind of do all kinds of different bikes within what I feel is like, I like to do rideable motorcycles. Hypocritically, the Death Machine is a rideable motorcycle, not the most rideable motorcycle, but through that paint school, I would call it a school, through Brushmaster's Getaway, some of the paint instructors there were heavily involved with what became the performance bike movement. You know what I mean? So like Jeremy Senior, Jeremy Lucky Strike was one of the guys that really showed me a lot of stuff there. And we're still pretty good friends. And, that segued into some of my involvement into FXR stuff and some of the Dyna stuff. Well, that kind of took away from some of the old bikes for a little window of a year or two, where, man, I still am very into FXRs, and the bike that I need to ride to work every day needs to go 90 miles an hour.
Right.
It's interstate the whole way.
Right.
Unless you want to take an hour to get here on an old bike, and then you don't really want to work by the time you get here. You go ahead and get here, But we break it up quite a bit to be able to do a variety of different kind of bikes. But even within the project, in a like I did the Green Miss Mary bike. It's probably the fastest bike that's been completed here. I did that bike in 9 weeks. It's the mint green and brown cone shovel head that we finished for Brian Taylor October of last year. Did that bike in 9 weeks. That was from fabrication to paint to a running, assembled, complete motorcycle. So I got born free bike. It takes a significant amount of months, but for 1 month, you might be doing all fabrication.
That's right.
You know what I mean? Next month, you're doing all paint. Next month, you're doing reassembly, or maybe a whole nother portion of, maybe it's 2 months of fabrication, where a portion of that you're just doing exhaust. A portion of that you're developing foot controls, which is fun in itself because you got an idea. I get my ideas usually when I'm like in the shower or something where you have nothing to write with.
Right.
Yeah.
And you go running out looking for a pen and paper and try to jot your ideas down,
before you forget them.
Right. When that's part of a project, and you can maybe try to make some time to do it quick enough to be within the budget you're getting paid for, man, you got a fun couple days of like, I had this idea in my head and these are the foot controls that came from it.
Yeah.
That breaks up a lot of the monotony, and I'm really fortunate that it's like that.
It's cool. That's cool. Fish, in 2020, you entered the People's Champ competition for the Born Free Bike Show. Walk us through what the experience was like, and basically what it meant to you to make it to the final 6. And was that a turning point with Alleyway Kustoms?
It absolutely was. So, in 2018, my 51 Panhead that became Francine was one of the bikes that I had. Now, when I was talking about having a construction company or building bikes on the side, and you have a bike to ride. Now, as a business, I got my side projects and I got my customers' bikes. So I got this 51 Panhead as a part of a barn find deal.
Nice.
And I had to buy 3 bikes with it up in South Carolina. And I had to buy them within 24 hours on a Sunday. And it was a tricky negotiation. But my plan was, ever since I sold that 48 replica Panhead, I wanted a real Panhead. I had a 62. I wanted a real Panhead. I wanted a rigid frame. And I like the bobber style. So I was like, I'm going to get this bike together as a bobber, do a 16-inch rear, 18 front, run a Springer, like some kind of Springer bars, stock bars, and just ride it around. And then maybe in a few years when I get older, I'll restore the whole thing, because it was a real frame, real motor, real transmission. So I was apprenticing.
Sweet.
I was apprenticing a guy. His name's Jared Barnes. We're still good friends. He just kept hanging out long enough. He was in the Coast Guard, and he's like, man, he hit me up. And he's like, I want to do a bike and I need some guidance, and I'd like to pay you, and can I watch? That turned into an apprenticeship. Long story longer about the apprenticeship is that he told me about People's Champ, which I had barely seen. And this is right after Show Class stopped doing People's Champ and Biltwell took it over. And he goes, hey man, I wouldn't be here if I didn't think there was some cool stuff going on. And you're clearly trying to do a business. He's like, you should enter this competition. Whatever becomes of it, it'll help build the company. Because that time, my social media wasn't even, it was private.
Oh, no.
I didn't even have it open. I was just a guy. I was like, I could be building bikes in a cave. I'm doing what I want to do. This is word of mouth. I didn't need all the hype.
Yeah.
I wasn't doing it for those reasons. I wanted to make money, but there wasn't even advertising then, and I was busy, thankfully. I don't mean to sound that way, but I was thankful for it, and I didn't really think about it, So he's like, you should enter this competition. And I was like, all right. So I went home, and the wife and I had come to terms with me doing this stuff. We're going to keep it mellow. Stuff's not going to get all wild. I'm going to not start partying again. We're not going to start repeating bad habits, all this
Right.
stuff. So, you know, I had to go to her. I had to say, hey, listen, you know, I'm thinking about doing this thing. It's a show about a show in California, or a competition about a show in California. And this is why I'm doing it. I'm not going to California. It's, you know, no big deal. But I'm going to submit. And once I submit, I'm going to commit to a certain degree. So I submitted that project as a bobber restoration. And I'm like, I'm not going to get in. You know, I heard that year there was 2,000 entries.
Wow.
It's just a
Jeez.
figure I heard loosely talked about when we finally were out in California talking to Bill from Billwell and some different people. So we made, I think at that time it was 25 people. Then it would cut to 13 with an online vote. Then would cut to the final 6. The final 6 were required to go to California. As soon as I received an email and the formalities of this thing, I was like, whoa, this is kind of serious. You know, they were like,
yeah.
in there, I don't want to, you know, disclose information that maybe I shouldn't share, but there is a part of the email that says, hey, no one's ever not made it to California. So if you're having
Jeez.
reservations, don't be that guy.
Right.
And it also said what I didn't know. It's almost like a little bit of a business school on how to promote yourself doing this. It was awesome. You know, it said, these are our requirements. We're going to require you to use these hashtags and these tags and posts in social media. And we're going to request and require you to do that frequently. And if you're not, we're going to kind of check in on you. However it was phrased, you know what I mean? So that was also an eye opener. I was like, oh, okay, we're getting serious here. And I was like, okay. So
Yeah.
went through the motions, and we not only got accepted, but then it's like, oh, then now you have this deadline out here. Here's your deadline. Voting starts now for the next stage. So I didn't really think that was going to affect me the way it did. And it created a lot more pressure, than I thought it would.
Thanks for joining us for part 1. We will be back next week with part 2 with Fish, so stay tuned.